We've put so much emphasis, not you and I, but I would say Niner content creators, fans, have put so much emphasis in arm strength that we've made it a discussion point this offseason. And yesterday, when I had a chance to be standing right there in front of the Niners quarterback coach, I decided at the very end to ask him what he thought of Brock's arm strength, and is it an issue? Did he view it in any way as an issue? And it was like, what? I mean, it was like, what do you mean? I mean, he kept saying, hey, there's a reason we drafted this guy. So, I think that's kind of, at the end of the day, the Niners feel really good about the fact that they drafted Brock Purdy, and they probably should. But it was like it had never dawned on him that Brock Purdy had anybody would take any issue with his arm strength in any way, shape, or form. Give me your read on that. I mean, it was like absolutely not. I don't even know where it comes from. He goes, I've never heard that debate. I don't participate in that debate. I don't agree with that. I think there's plenty of arm strength there. And I think, and he basically shot the entire conversation down. We saw Kurt Warner kind of do that as well, pointing to actual playoff film and showing, hey, this is the underneath route. Here's the intermediate route. Here's the deep quadrant option. And here's the guy wide open underneath. But here's Purdy taking a look and throwing it deep. And I think he kind of went through the film and systematically showed you example after example of why Brock Purdy is not your check down artist guy. I mean, it's funny because Alex Smith, I thought one of my biggest frustrations watching Alex Smith was that he was captain check down. And it was almost like he was averse to taking any chances at all it was almost uncomfortable watching the 49ers under Alex Smith towards the end. He was so unwilling to throw it down the field. And maybe that was protection based. Maybe it was arm strength based. Maybe it was lack of downfield rapport with his receivers. But that's what I saw with Alex. It's funny that when I asked Greasy about Purdy's arm strength, he pushed back in a huge way and was like, I have no idea where that's coming from.
Hey, this whole conversation is I think, I don't want to get anybody pissed off at me, but I'll just say this. The people that really, really, really know football aren't saying this. The people that really, really, really know the game aren't questioning Brock Purdy's ability to push the ball down the field. They're not questioning his ability to make the throws. They're not questioning his arm strength. They're not doing any of that stuff. And you've got the quarterback coach saying it. You've got Kurt Warner, who's in the NFL Hall of Fame, for gosh darn it, saying it. And you have another 49er quarterback, Jeff Garcia, saying it as well. And
I didn't see that. You mentioned that Garcia spoke on the radio about Purdy, and of course, people are going to seek out guys like Garcia to give their thoughts and perspective on the Niner quarterback situation. And he's a very cerebral guy. I didn't see what he said. What did he say?
Well, just to kind of like with this point, when it comes to like the arm strength point, this was just part of one of his answers was basically, hey, look, he's a smaller stature guy, but that doesn't matter. He understands the game. He understands the defensive coverages. He understands what's going on offensively and where do they go with the football. And if you just watch this guy play and you're not a fan of another quarterback on this football team, it's clear. I know people get upset with me because they feel like I hate Trey Lance or they feel like I like Jimmy Garoppolo or whatever it is. But just watch the guy play the game. The ball goes where it's supposed to go. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of days about the need for your quarterback to be able to throw the ball downfield to win a Super Bowl. So let's take a look at the guy that just won the most recent Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes, right? Cool. Patrick Mahomes in his postseason career has averaged less than 9% of his passes going 20-plus yards down the field. Patrick Mahomes last season in the playoff run that led to the Super Bowl, he threw 7 passes more than 20 yards down the field. 7. In the whole run of the Kansas City Chiefs, completed 3 of them. Brock Purdy, 14. He completed 6 of them. So guess what? Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes completed the same percentage of throws beyond 20 yards in the postseason last year. Okay, Jack, that's not enough. These guys got to air that thing out. They got to go 30-plus yards downfield. Cool. Let's look at those numbers. Last year for Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, according to the charts on Next Gen Stats, he threw the ball twice more than 30 yards down the field in the entire playoffs. Completed 0. Brock Purdy in the playoffs last year, he threw 2 that went over 30 yards. Completed 0. These guys had the exact same completion percentage on throws 20 yards or more down the field. That's Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes. Now, is Brock Purdy Patrick Mahomes? No, I'm not saying that. But the narrative around Brock Purdy is so wrong that people need to actually take a step back and just pay attention to the people who might know more than you and don't argue with them so much. Ask questions to learn instead of giving your own opinion. I think that's one of the biggest things that that I've taken away, especially with after watching the video from Kurt Warner where he came out and showed this stuff. And then immediately after, it's like, well, show this game and show this. And it doesn't change anything. I still don't agree with it. What then, if you're not going to agree with it, that's fine. Just keep talking. It's time to ignore you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some credibility to the, there's some legitimacy to pointing out that Brock doesn't have the biggest arm.
Absolutely.
I can look at Joe Flacco. I can look at young Terry Bradshaw and see top of the scale arm. But
absolutely,
arm strength is a part of it, but it's not. It's like it's also about checking boxes. And to me, the word is requisite. Does he have requisite arm strength? Because like Nick Mullins, very similar size player to Brock Purdy, but did not have requisite arm strength. And over time, defenses adjusted, and they stopped defending as much down the field in the deep quadrants of the field. They stopped late in the down worrying about sideline throws and kind of clogged the middle. And then all of a sudden, Nick Mullins is throwing interceptions. And there's guys all over the field, and it seems like the field looks very crowded in the middle of the field. You could kind of make an argument even about Jimmy Garoppolo, who actually had more than requisite arm strength and a really quick release, but he didn't challenge a lot down the field. The Niners under Garoppolo did not have a well-developed outside the numbers passing game or a they didn't have a real consistent down the field passing game. And so what happened? Late in the down, if Jimmy was late in the down, guys, if you're going to cheat in or cheat out, guess what? The defensive coordinator says, late in the down, guys, cheat in off the hash. He's going to go somewhere inside between the hashes late in the down. And sure enough, the field was clogged and Jimmy starts throwing picks. So I think you have to demonstrate that you can make plays outside the numbers in the NFL. Down the field, to me, is not quite as important as outside the numbers. You have to be able to make the defense defend the length of the field, but the width of the field matters a ton. And can you put the deep out on a line? Does it have enough zip on it to get it out there? That's a big one for sure. But I saw plenty. I mean, Brock Purdy had the best quarterback rating of any quarterback in the NFL outside the numbers. Best. Take your favorite quarterback. They all lined up behind Brock. He had a better quarterback rating than every other quarterback outside the numbers. To me, that shows requisite arm strength. And I've never understood this fascination with putting down and using disparaging terms to describe a quarterback that's, by almost all accounts, one of the great stories of personnel evaluation, to the point where John Schneider from Seattle and Eric DeCosta from Baltimore, without anybody prompting them, both brought up Brock Purdy in their pre-draft discussion, talking about how the 49ers did an incredible job at discovering Brock Purdy and expressing that they would like to find their own version of Brock Purdy. And what does that mean? That means a guy who can really process and has requisite arm strength, and yet is going to be overlooked because of perceived flaws. And they're looking for that player. And that, to me, Brock Purdy's the reason 14 quarterbacks were drafted in this draft, because everybody's looking. In the past, they looked hard for quarterbacks. Now they're looking harder because of Brock Purdy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I've heard the Jimmy Garoppolo has been the quarterback here, you know, since 2017 all the way through. We heard some of these things throughout that time. Was that, you know, just take away the middle of the field, just take away the middle of the field, and teams took away the middle of the field, or they tried to, but the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, he's good enough as a play designer, as a offensive coordinator, to be able to still get his guys into positions to make throws. And even though they were taking things away, this is an offense that continued to work. And I think the difference between Garoppolo and Purdy, one of them is that Garoppolo, his knee injury in 2018 wiped away his ability to move. Because if you remember in 2017, he was able to show some more movement. In 28, after that, it just really wasn't there anymore. And sure, you can do certain things, but Purdy's ability to move around, his athleticism to make plays with his legs, that changes the game, because you can try to take away certain areas of the field, but with his ability to move, that allows Shanahan the ability to put him in different spots so that the launch point isn't necessarily from the middle of the field or, you know, at the hash. It can be a little bit outside, so he can complete a pass to Juwan Jennings outside the numbers, but he's throwing the ball from outside the hash to begin with, so it's not quite as far of a throw. They're able to work their entire offense with Brock Purdy, and he's giving them plus because of his ability to use his legs. And I think that's the one thing. And I've heard a lot of people, the other thing that people try to use to knock down Brock Purdy is they compare him to Jimmy Garoppolo, or they say, well, we already saw this with Jimmy Garoppolo in 2018, 2017.
I would push back on that and say your scope is way too limited. If everything is about, it's like somebody evaluating a girlfriend and saying, well, my ex-girlfriend. There's more than two women in the world. You know what I mean? It's like, your scope is a little too limited. I think all this fascination with Jimmy was good for 5 games. So the fact that Brock's been good means that, and Jimmy wasn't a franchise quarterback. Well, then Brock's been good for, whatever it is, 7, 8, 9 games. Then by definition, he can't be your franchise quarterback. Different people, different situations, different prospects.
And Garoppolo's numbers came at the end of the season playing against some bad teams and against teams that one of his wins was against the Rams team that was playing their backup. So take whatever. But then you look at what Purdy did, and he not only did he do it in the regular season, the 10 games that he threw passes in, 7 of them were against playoff teams. He did it in the playoffs. He did it against the Seahawks in the playoffs. He did it against Dallas in the playoffs. Jimmy Garoppolo in 2017, it was easy to see some flaws from him. It was easy to see the balls where he's just throwing it up for, you only live once kind of throw, and the guy comes down with it. And we didn't see that from Brock Purdy. Maybe there's a play or two that you could point to over the course of 8 games, that last 8-game stretch where he just kind of throws the ball up for a guy to make a catch. But I don't remember one off the top of my head, whereas I do with Jimmy Garoppolo. I remember watching him do it at Levi Stadium in his first home game. I believe it was against the Tennessee Titans. It just kind of was, threw a ball up in the air, and luckily the guy came back and made a catch. And we saw that kind of stuff a lot. And we didn't see that. There's just so many things that are different between the two. You can point to some stats, you can point to some things like that. But if, as some guys like to say, if you actually watch the film, this guy played at a very high level, especially as a rookie. I think that's the other part that gets missed, is that this is a guy that was a rookie, stepped onto the field, and moved your offense flawlessly. And I understand he's got a bunch of great athletes around him. You should not get knocked because of your fact that your team had a lot of talent around you. Look at the teams Joe Montana won the Super Bowl with in 88 and 89, just for example. Look at the team that Steve Young won the Super Bowl with in 94. Were those teams loaded? They were absolutely loaded. 89 through 94, they had the best friggin' wide receiver in the history of the game to throw the ball to. even in 81 and 84, in those teams, those had really good defenses to help the offense and get the turnovers. That's one of the reasons they were so good in 81 is that you had Ronnie Lott and Eric Wright and Carlton Williamson and Dwight Hicks intercepting the ball all over the place. And so that gave them good, it all works together. So every single thing, when you try to put down Brock Purdy and the performance that he did, you don't even have to go to NFL history to get examples that are like, what are we talking about here? Just look at the 49ers history from 1981 till now. And part of that is, Larry, there's a lot of folks that are talking about it, especially like on Twitter and things like that. They didn't watch the 49ers in 81 through 90, or by the time they started watching the 49ers when they were like 5 and 6, it was 94, right? So the great 49er teams that we actually watched, they're hearing about it from highlight films or their parents or what have you. And that's not to put them down. It's just like, you just haven't seen it, and it's okay. You just haven't seen it. You don't totally understand because you didn't see how loaded those teams were. Joe Montana and those teams at the 49ers and from 81 to 94, those Super Bowl winning teams, just take a minute, look at the defensive stats of those teams. Before, those defenses were awesome. The 88 defense, I think, finished the season like 6th overall in points allowed. But if you look at that 1988 season, and instead of just looking at the number, if you know how that season played out, you realize that team was not good over the first half of the year. If you look at that team from the Washington game when they were 6-5 going into that game. They beat Washington on a Monday night, and they roll the rest of the way through. That defense allowed, I believe it was 13 points a game or some ridiculous number. It was a number that was better than the Chicago Bears 1985 defense. I mean, they were awesome. And that's part of the reason why they won this. They wouldn't have won the Super Bowl. They only scored 20 points in the Super Bowl. They were not good in that Super Bowl in terms of getting the ball into the end zone. They moved the ball up and down the field, but they didn't score touchdowns, right? It was a low scoring 20. That defense kept them in the game. The defense is why a big part of why Joe Montana had the opportunity at the end of the game to drive it down. You talk about like the comebacks and how all this kind of stuff. You don't come from behind to win if you don't have a great defense. And that's part of it too. You have to have a fully, if you want to talk about guys like this, look at Dan Marino. Dan Marino was one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever win the Super Bowl. The reason he never won the Super Bowl, or one of the best quarterbacks to play the game. The reason he never won the Super Bowl is because he didn't have a full team around him. He didn't have a defense that could stop other people. He didn't have a running game that could take the pressure off of him. John Elway, the same thing. And guess what happened? Mike Shanahan went to Denver, got the running game behind him, got a defense that could stop other teams. And guess what happened? He won the friggin' Super Bowl. Yes, NFL is a quarterback-driven league, but your best quarterbacks don't win the Super Bowl if they don't have other people around them to make plays and pick them up.